Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is Studying the Bible with Brother Bolin. I want to continue our discussion on the counterculture of the 1960s. And we were talking about some of the movements that the counterculture gave birth to in the 1960s. We were talking about, we mentioned the gay revolution, the anti-war revolution, the feminist revolution or feminist movement, and a few other movements. The civil rights movement, we found out that the civil rights movement was an actually legit movement, but that the communists hijacked it, turned it into something else, but that's another story all by itself. And we also found out that the counterculture of the 1960s was not a spontaneous phenomenon, that it was a planned phenomenon in order to completely dismantle America and completely strip it from its Judeo-Christian roots. We found out that one of the sources of this interruption was a school known as the Frankfurt School of Marxism that we learned originated in Germany and were actually originated in Russia. Then they moved to Germany, and then in the 1930s, the Frankfurt School Marxist professors left the Frankfurt School of Marxism in the 1930s and migrated here to America. And they began to infiltrate our school systems. They began to infiltrate the entertainment industry, music, radio, news, print news. You know, in the 30s, they didn't have the internet, or we know they didn't have the internet and all those type of things. But these Frankfurt School Marxists infiltrated all the different institutions, the educational system. They infiltrated all the different institutions that have influence on the minds and perceptions of the American people. They infiltrated also. We learned also that they infiltrated the religious systems. They infiltrated Bible colleges. They infiltrated Bible seminaries. We learned about critical theory and what this tool was in reference to how the Frankfurt School Marxist professors used that tool to completely dismantle the belief in the Bible, to completely dismantle belief in modern methodologies, traditional methodologies, and concepts that were passed down through the years, such as math and history and social and science. Critical theory was basically designed to completely deconstruct these particular traditional belief systems in order to rebuild them into what the communist insurgents initiated. We learned that the source of this type of philosophy, these Frankfurt School Marxists, we learned that the source that energizes them is spiritual source. We learned that in Ephesians the 6th chapter that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That many of these communist Frankfurt School Marxists were atheists, and some historians even say some of them were deeply involved in the occult. They posed as atheists, but many of them were Satanists, practicing Satanists. In fact, something that I didn't mention the other week was that Karl Marx, the founder of communism, in 1848, when he co-wrote what is known as the Communist Manifestos with Friedrich Engels, a friend of his, when he co-wrote that in 1848, it is said by some historians that Karl Marx was a Christian. He started off as a Christian, then he rejected Christianity and became a Satanist. But then he posed as an atheist. So you know right then and there that the Communist Manifestos were demonic in their origin. So we found these things out. So the counterculture of the 1960s was a demonic assault against America by these institutions, and one of them was the Frankfurt School of Marxism, that was designed to completely destroy and dismantle the Judeo-Christian foundation that America was made on. Now, what I want to talk about today is maybe a very controversial subject. And prepare yourself for this. Prepare yourself for this. Are you ready? We're going to talk about a movement that came out in the 1960s. And in fact, I mentioned this in my introduction this morning. A movement that came out in the 1960s. It was a part of the counterculture of the 1960s, and that is radical feminism. Radical feminism. Oh, yeah, people don't like to talk about that, but I got to talk about this. This is what God's laying on my heart. What people fail to realize in America, women fail to realize this, and a lot of men fail to realize this, is that radical feminism is not about bringing equality to women. Radical feminism is a tool by the that was used by the Frankfurt School Marxist professors and communists in order to completely dismantle the family unit in America. Now, let me explain something about this. What we have to understand is that historians state that there were two waves of feminism. The first wave of feminism started in the 18th century in England, and essentially the first wave of feminism wasn't about destroying the family unit that God had ordained. The first wave of feminism that started in the 18th century in England was basically what the feminists taught during this time was that women should be allowed to pursue careers and pursue, better their talents and so forth. But it was not designed to destroy the family unit. These feminists believe that women should be treated equally in the workplace and that they should use their talents and abilities to build up their family. The first wave of feminism was about empowering women to be better women and better wives and better mothers. It was to empower them. Whatever skills that this first wave of feminists learned, they were to take those skills and use them to bless their family. So the first wave of feminists, which began once again in the 18th century in England, was more or less a positive thing. It wasn't designed to dismantle the family unit. However, in the 19th century, things began to change, because in the 19th century, when the communists began to infiltrate America, they infiltrated the feminist movement. And then in the 1960s, it blew up. Now, what I mean by it blowing up was that it became more radical. This was known as the second wave of feminism. The second wave of feminism is a more extreme, more radical form of feminism. In fact, some historians state that radical feminists do not worship the God of the Bible. They worship a pagan goddess known as Gaia. I may not be pronouncing that word properly, known as Gaia. Gaia is the goddess of the earth, or Mother Earth. Gaia is spelled Gaoi, I believe. Gaoi. I might have misspelled it. I should have looked that up. But that's basically the name of the particular goddess that they serve, according to these historians. They don't serve the God of the Bible. They serve a pagan deity. So that lets you know right then and there that the concept is demonic. Now, what do radical feminists believe? Like I said earlier, they reject the traditional role of family. What radical feminists believe is that the family unit was designed by men in order to oppress women and to enslave women. So therefore, radical feminists feel like, well, men who want to dominate and control and abuse women created the institution of marriage in order to control the woman and confine the woman in a home. Radical feminists see marriage and the family as a negative thing. It's a unit that they believe that was created by men to suppress and oppress the woman. So therefore, it needs to be destroyed. It needs to be destroyed according to radical feminists. So when it comes down, and now let me say this too before I go any further. Are they right to some extent about men abusing their power in marriages? Yes. There's been physical abuse and verbal abuse in marriages throughout the centuries. I mean, of course. But radical feminists have used that as the pretext, if you will, the pretense to destroy the institution of marriage. Now, you may say, why is that important? Why do I need to know that? Because who created marriage? God did. The first marriage was in the Garden of Eden. But mankind, when Adam disobeyed God, because Adam was a representative of all humanity, we know this in Romans the 5th chapter, according to the Apostle Paul in Romans the 5th chapter, Adam was the representative of all humanity. When he disobeyed God and ate from the forbidden tree that his wife gave to him, from the fruit from the forbidden tree that Eve gave to him, he developed a sinful, rebellious nature. That sinful, rebellious nature was passed down to his posterity. That's all of humanity. And now, because of sin, sin has corrupted the natural order of the family unit. Therefore, men who are not educated in the word, men who are not yielded to the Holy Spirit, and men who are unbelievers, okay, but sometimes you got some believers or professed believers who are abusing their wives, use their power for the wrong reasons. And they physically and verbally abuse their wives because sin is in the heart of all of humanity. Sin corrupted God's natural, perfect order of marriage. So to some extent, they're right about men abusing their power. There has been men that have abused their power as husbands. But this is just a tool of Satan using radical feminism to dismantle the family unit. Satan wants to destroy the family unit so that he can get at the children. So that he can get at the children in order to manipulate their minds and control their minds and prepare them for the kingdom that he's planning for. Now you may ask, what kingdom is Satan planning for? If you read the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter, the 17th chapter, and the 18th chapter, Satan is trying to produce a one world government, one world economic system, and one world religion. He wants everyone to worship him. The easiest people to persuade and convince and deceive is young people, it's children, because their minds are fresh and open. So one of the methodologies of Satan is to energize and empower the radical feminist movement to dismantle the family in the country. So you have a lot of these radical feminists trying to destroy the family unit. And let me say something else too about this. If you look at movies, particularly movies, a lot of these recent movies coming out, big Hollywood production movies, if you pay attention to the dialogue and the plots, what have you noticed about a lot of these movies? The big budget Hollywood movies. I'm talking about the big budget ones. Have you been noticing a trend? In almost every one of these big budget Hollywood movies, almost all of them, women are always presented as people without flaws, they can do anything. And men are viewed as what they call toxic masculinity. To a radical feminist, any man that is a strong man, that is decisive, that's a strong man, is a strong leader, radical feminists consider him to be a toxic male. They hate strong men. They don't realize that they're being blinded by Satan, but they hate strong men. And in movies, in a lot of these movies, they present strong men, or present men as weak, as incompetent, and the women as powerful and the answer to all the problems. There's a reason for that. That is designed to get into the subconscious of millions of Americans that watch this so that they can demonize any strong man, any leader or strong male leader. The purpose is to demonize strong male leaders in order to put men and women against each other. Okay? Men and women against each other, competing against each other, which is a communist concept, or a Marxist concept rather, the oppressed and the oppressor, the male being the oppressor and the oppressed being the female, put them at odds with each other in order to dismantle the family and get at the children in order to manipulate and control the children's minds and prepare them for the kingdom that Satan is prepared for them, which is to worship the Antichrist. Because Satan wants worship, does he not? Didn't Jesus say that in Matthew the 4th? Isn't that implied in Matthew the 4th chapter? In Matthew the 4th chapter, we know the story. And I'm going to sum this video up with this. In Matthew the 4th chapter, we know the story. Satan came to Jesus when he was in the garden and he was praying and fasting, and Satan came to Jesus and tempted him. And in this temptation, what was one of the temptations that Satan came to him was, if you would bow down and worship me, I will give you all the kingdoms of the world, because they have been delivered unto me and I can give them to whomever they want if you bow down and worship me. Satan ultimately wants worship. So, because he ultimately wants worship, what he's doing right now is planning, by God's permission and sovereignty, planning a global government, global religion, and global economic system where he will ultimately receive what he's always desired from the world, and that is worship in the person of the Antichrist. What Satan is trying to do is use radical feminism as a tool to dismantle the family unit in order to get at the children, in order to prepare them for the kingdom that he has prepared for them. That's what's wrong with radical feminism. And I could go further with this, but there's so much to learn just from the concept of radical feminism. Remember this as I end this video. There's two ways of feminism. The first wave started in the 18th century in England. Second wave started in the 19th century, the 1960s, during the counterculture revolution. Okay. And both of those two ways of feminism are diametrically opposed to each other. The first wave is, I'm in total support of. I'm in support of that. And the reason why I'm in support of that, because the Bible supports that. You may ask, well, where does the Bible support that? Well, if you read Proverbs, the 31st chapter, the Proverbs 31st chapter gives us a beautiful description of an empowered, godly woman. That she had a trade. She was skilled. She had a trade, but she used her trade and skill to what? Bless her husband and her family. So that's the first wave of feminism. Radical feminism is all about the woman. Reject the man, reject the family. It's all about the woman. It's all about fulfilling what she wants. It's all about at the rejection of her family and husband. Because according to radical feminists, they believe that the family was created by men in order to suppress and oppress and control the woman. So it needs to be destroyed. So you're seeing this in a lot of these movies. And let me say this, and I forgot to bring this out in my closing, about the movies. The movies, in order for a movie to be made, there has to be a screenplay. The screenplay is basically the skeleton or the backbone of the movie. Many of the screenplays in a lot of these big Hollywood production movies are written by radical feminists. Sometimes these radical feminists are women. Sometimes they're men, believe it or not. But these screenplays are written by radical feminists, and these radical feminists have a worldview. It's a satanic worldview. And they want these radical feminists want their agenda and worldview to change the mindsets of the people that watch the movies. So they put these plot points in the movies through the dialogue and the plots of the films. And you see it in many of these films. You see it all over. One of the latest ones was called 355, about these women assassins or something like that. But the movie flopped terribly. I didn't watch it. I didn't get a chance to see it. But that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But that could be an example of how the radical feminism is designed to demonize and destroy the image of the man in the country in order to split up and destroy the institution of marriage to get at the children. But I hope you all have learned something from this. Perhaps if the Lord later say the same, I may explain this in greater detail in a later video. But if you have any comments on this, please leave your comments in the comment section below. If you like this video, press the like button. Share this video and subscribe. God bless you all, and see you again on Studying the Bible with Brother Bolin.